I'm Steven Thrasher, staff writer for The Village Voice, and I'm talking to Chris Geidner of Metro Weekly. And Chris, I wanted to talk to you about a phrase that you headed a column with recently, that the Obama administration has lost all pretense of clarity, or all pretense of clarity is gone in terms of marriage. What made you come up with that?
It was on Tuesday at the White House press briefing. I asked Press Secretary Jay Carney about the comments from the First Lady that the Supreme Court, in its decisions in the coming decades, will be making decisions that will impact whether Americans are free to love whomever we choose. And I asked Carney if that was a reference to marriage equality, and if it wasn't, what it was a reference to. And Jay Carney said that it was a reference to the president's position on the Defense of Marriage Act. And I found that to be quite remarkable, because I don't think that many people think that being free to love whomever you choose relates to whether or not you have equal Social Security benefits.
Right, especially considering this week, which we'll talk about in a minute, that the New Hampshire legislature was taking up marriage quite specifically, and it's in play in other places as well.
Well, and I mean, the 90% of the discussion about the Supreme Court and marriage is about whether or not the Supreme Court would end up finding, similar to the Loving versus Virginia case in 1967, whether same-sex marriage same-sex couples marrying and being prohibited from marrying is a unconstitutional violation of their equal protection rights, or an unconstitutional violation of their due process right to having fundamental rights protected, including marriage. And so the idea that when the First Lady says that the Supreme Court is going to be deciding that we can love whomever we choose relates to the president deciding that that the Department of Justice isn't going to be defending DOMA, seems, I mean, it's laughable on its face.
Have you noticed with the First Lady, in terms of gay issues, or in general from your time in the White House briefing room, whether she tends to be quite within the administration line, or is she known to stray more from the script than the president?
No, I mean, she's very much online, and in fact has taken, as First Lady, a much more traditional route to her activities as First Lady, akin to Laura Bush than Hillary Clinton had as First Lady, because I mean, her two major initiatives are Let's Move, the children's health, although, I mean, of course, the opposition has turned that into some nefarious thing, but
right.
She's
just refused to bake cookies like Hillary Clinton.
Yeah, she's dealing with children's health and veteran and military families. Those are her two issues, which is pretty much as traditional a First Lady as you can have, and has not waged into policy disputes.
So the White House is still trying to split hairs on marriage. How did they react to?
I mean, they've been trying to, and this was the reason why I finally wrote what I did about that this is taken on an Alice in Wonderland sort of element, is that they've been straddling the divide for some time. I mean, ever since. It's been more than a year now, ever since the Department of Justice and Obama decided that DOMA was unconstitutional and that they wouldn't be defending the federal definition of marriage in court. They've been straddling the divide. But the idea that not only are we going to straddle the divide, but we're going to talk about the Supreme Court deciding whether Americans can love whomever they choose, and that is somehow not a reference to marriage equality is I mean, incoherent.
Lewis Carroll, yeah.
Yeah.
How did they react to your question, your exclusive, when you were able to produce documentation that candidate Senator Obama had agreed to support the LGBT contractor issue?
Well, what Metro Weekly reported was that in 2008, in February 2008, then candidate Obama told the Houston GLBT political caucus that he would support a federal contractor non-discrimination policy that includes sexual orientation and gender identity as president. And this is the first time that any proof has been found that the president had specifically addressed the question of federal contractor non-discrimination policy. Previously, the White House has talked about the fact that the president does support the Employment Non-Discrimination Act and believes that is an appropriate bill that he hopes Congress acts on. But obviously, Congress isn't going to be acting on that in this Congress, and so that's why there's been the push for this federal contractor executive order, which is just adding to an existing federal contractor non-discrimination order that already exists based on race, religion, national origin, and sex. So this is not a surprising request. It was included in all of the initial requests for action from the administration by the Human Rights Campaign and the National Gay and Lesbian Task Force. And so it's not a surprising issue. And yet the White House, still when I asked on Tuesday, Jay Carney's reaction was, well, that relates to the executive order, and I'm not going to talk about any executive order that may or may not be before the White House for consideration. And it's kind of remarkable to me.
Why do you think, did this not come up at all during the first 2 years when Obama had, the support within the Congress, although that doesn't really pertain to an executive order? Was it something that got pushed aside because of don't ask, don't tell, passively or actively, or is it just...
Well, I think that there was there was the focus on the Hate Crimes Prevention Act in the first year of the 111th Congress, which was the first year of Obama's presidency, and there was hope that the Employment Non-Discrimination Act would quickly follow from that. And so I don't think there was a lot of discussion of executive orders because of the hope that there would be the legislation. And then following that, you got into 2010 and you had Don't Ask, Don't Tell became the prominent issue, but there was still hope that Representative George Miller would take action to move ENDA forward in the House. And when that didn't happen, it was only the time that you started hearing a lot about this executive order. But as the New York Times reports today, that there are things in the ENDA that would be accomplished if ENDA passed.
I see.
And then there are things in the executive order that even if you had ENDA, the executive order would cover additional things because it would give, one thing that it gives is the Department of Labor the permission to go in and investigate corporations that are federal contractors for their policies, and obviously wouldn't do that. So they're even though it wasn't discussed back in 2009 and 2010, there are some reasons why it probably should have been, and I think it's a matter of people there being limited people pushing for things at any given moment, and the focus was more on ENDA in the 111th Congress than the executive order.
So coming back to end with two things that are coming back to marriage, where the administration is really splitting hairs, what do you make of the defeat of the attempt to repeal marriage equality in New Hampshire, where it was defeated in a Republican-controlled legislature?
Yeah, and it was. I think it is the thing that that the Republican elites, as they would say, like Ted Olson and now Ken Mellman and others, about the fact that they believe that marriage is a coherent conservative Republican value. Marriage equality is. I think that this was. We've had like 4 or 5 senators or representatives in each of the recent legislatures to consider it on the Republican side to vote for marriage equality in New York, in New Jersey, right, in Washington, Maryland, right, and in Washington. There were Republicans who voted for marriage equality, but yesterday there were about 100 Republicans. Now, the New Hampshire legislature is like every third person in the state. But
and a state that believes live free or die.
Yeah, but I mean, I mean, you had a basically 200 for keeping the marriage law and 100 against keeping the marriage law, and about 100 of those for keeping the marriage law were Republicans, and that, I mean, is the first time that we've seen a significant portion of the Republicans in a legislative body vote in favor of marriage equality. And I think that is a sign of where things are at. It is in a state that does have a libertarian Republican principles, right, sort of at its base, but it is still the Republican Party, and it is a sign that the things that Ted Olson and Ken Mellman have been trying to tell people, that there are, at least in some parts of the country, Republicans that appear to be listening.
Yeah, I think it's really significant that it happened in New Hampshire, both where this kind of takes it away as a wedge issue for the presidential election. But it's also interesting because NOM was, they were engaged there, they were fighting this, and it's not a marginal loss, it's a really significant one. What are you hearing about North Carolina, where, again, the White House has, in the most cautious, narrow way possible, seemed to support marriage equality tepidly there?
Well, no, I mean, there the White House didn't support marriage equality. The White House opposed an anti-gay effort.
Right. That's what I mean by the most tepid. But yeah.
But no, I mean, that there's a difference there. I mean, this isn't like, I mean, you could actually argue that the Prop 8 position of opposing Prop 8 was more marriage equality, because that was actually an issue of, if you opposed Prop 8, you were keeping marriage equality. But opposing Amendment 1 in North right. Carolina won't create marriage equality.
That's true.
It will just keep it from, I mean, it will keep it from being in the Constitution. I mean, but what the White House did there is, well, it was the campaign. It wasn't the White House, first of all. But the campaign did mention the specific state and did explain. Cameron French, who's the Obama for America spokesman in North Carolina, said that the president opposes these divisive and discriminatory measures, which is the statement that the White House has always had. But then he said, and the president believes that the North Carolina amendment would do that, which, I mean, it gives additional, it does exactly what everybody says Obama coming out for marriage equality would do for this amendment in North Carolina. It gives backing, it gives support to other Democrats in the state to come out in opposition to the amendment and say, look, I'm just doing what the president did. Mm-hmm. And that's, I mean, within hours of the campaign statement being issued, the Governor Perdue, Beth Perdue, tweeted that she was thankful for the president's support in opposition to Amendment 1, and then gave another tweet talking about how it was wrong for the state and we should be protecting all families. And that is a stronger statement than Governor Perdue had given when she initially opposed Amendment 1, because her initial statement opposing Amendment 1 talked about how she voted for the Defense of Marriage Act statute in the state, but felt that an amendment was too far and would be bad for business because of the fact that it also could impair other relationships. But it wasn't at all the full-throated sort of defense of gay and lesbian families that she gave after the president stepped in. So, I mean, and that's the argument that everybody talks about for why the White House doing things, even when it might not be something that they technically have control over, why them taking action and making statements matters, because it does give cover to Democrats, especially in a southern state like North Carolina,
Right.
for the president to be on their side.
Well, thank you very much, Chris. I always appreciate your insight, and I'm probably going to be talking to Pam Spalding soon about North Carolina as well. But it'll be interesting to see how that's going to play out, because it's on the ballot there in November, correct?
No,
Oh, no.
North Carolina is the primary.
Oh, it is the primary.
It's
Okay.
May 6th, I think.
Right.
And Pam is the person to go to. She is on the ground and up to the minute on everything that's going on there.
All right. Thank you very much, sir.
Thanks, Steven.